The first time my sister tried to have me removed from my grandmother's trust, she did it over chicken, roasted potatoes, and a sheet cake with my grandmother's name on it. Michelle stood at the front of the room with one hand resting on the back of my chair. Our mother sat 2 seats away staring at her folded napkin. My father kept turning his water glass between his palms. "We're not attacking Lauren," Michelle said. "We're trying to help her before something serious happens." Then she looked toward Zachary Wilson, the attorney who held my grandmother's trust documents. "Christian and I are filing for co-trusteeship based on Lauren's recent erratic behavior." Nobody moved. I had a folder resting across my knees. Michelle didn't know what was inside it, neither did my mother. Zachary looked at me and asked, "Lauren, were you aware they intended to do this tonight?" "No." Mom finally lifted her head. "If you'd just listened when I said it was nerves, none of this needed to become so ugly." That was the moment I knew I had waited long enough. "My name is Lauren Carter, and I'm 32 years old. If you've ever been dismissed by the people who should have believed you, you'll understand why I stayed quiet. Please like this video and subscribe." 5 weeks before that dinner, I still believed my biggest problem was a bad reaction to stress. That sounds almost reasonable now. At the time, it was terrifying. To explain why my family found it so easy to call me unstable, I have to explain Michelle. Michelle is 4 years older than I am. Growing up, she was the daughter people prepared for. I was the daughter people assumed would adjust. When Michelle wanted piano lessons, Mom found a teacher. When I asked about guitar lessons 2 years later, Mom said we needed to be realistic about expenses. Michelle quit piano before Christmas. When colleges started sending brochures, our parents sat at the dining table with her for weeks. They compared dorms, meal plans, and scholarship packages. Nobody had to tell them to take her future seriously. By the time I was ready for college, most of the money they'd saved had already gone toward Michelle's tuition and an apartment she insisted was safer than student housing. Mom said, "You're more practical anyway. You'll figure something out." I did. That became the explanation for everything. Lauren would figure it out. If Michelle forgot a birthday, she was overwhelmed. If I missed one phone call, I was being cold. If Michelle borrowed something and damaged it, accidents happened. If I asked her to replace it, I was keeping score. Dad noticed more than he admitted. Every so often, he would give me a look across the room that said he understood. Then Mom would start talking, and he would look down. The only person who never treated my competence like permission to ignore me was my father's mother, Cheryl. Grandma Cheryl owned 3 duplexes around Kearney and a narrow commercial building on Central Avenue. None of it was glamorous. The duplexes had tan siding, small yards, and furnaces that seemed to fail on the coldest morning of every winter. The commercial building had been a shoe store, an insurance office, and for several years, a place that sold custom window blinds. Grandma had bought carefully and paid down debt. She kept everything in gray filing cabinets in the back room of her house. Every lease had a paper copy. Every repair receipt was stapled to a handwritten note. In 2013, when I was 19, she asked me to help her sort tenant files. I thought it was a one-day favor. I arrived at her house on a Saturday morning with gas station coffee and found her kitchen table covered in folders. She had yellow, sticky notes running up both arms. "You're late," she said. I looked at the clock. It was 8:57. She'd told me 9. "I'm 3 minutes early. Then you're late for being early." That was Grandma. She handed me a legal pad and told me one tenant's security deposit had been entered twice. "Find it." I laughed because I thought she was joking. She sat down with her coffee. "I'm serious. It took me nearly an hour. One amount had been written as a deposit in the rent ledger, then copied into an expense column when Grandma transferred it to a separate account. The money wasn't missing. The record was just wrong. When I showed her, she nodded. "Good. That's it? What else do you want? A parade?" I wouldn't turn one down. She slid a cinnamon roll toward me. That was apparently the parade. I kept helping after that. At first, I entered rent payments and organized invoices. Then I started meeting repair people when Grandma couldn't. She taught me how to read a lease without skipping the boring parts. She showed me why every tenant conversation needed a date and a note, even if the conversation felt friendly. People remember what helps them, she told me. Paper remembers what happened. Michelle knew I helped Grandma. She just didn't think it mattered. At holidays, she called me Grandma's little assistant. Mom laughed the first few times. Christian joined in after he married Michelle in 2019. Christian worked as a paralegal. He liked to explain documents to people who had already read them. One Christmas, he asked if Grandma had finally moved her leases online. I said, "We use property software now, but she keeps signed copies." He smiled at Michelle. So Lauren spent 6 years building a spreadsheet. Grandma heard him from the kitchen. "No," she said. "Lauren spent 6 years learning my business." Christian stopped smiling. It was one of the few times anyone corrected him in our family. By 2023, Grandma's health had declined enough that I took over daily property management. I collected rent, scheduled repairs, renewed leases, handled insurance notices, and sent her a written report every month. I was 29 then. I also worked full-time as a claims compliance auditor. My job is less interesting than it sounds. I review files to make sure payments match policies and the documents support what people claim happened. Most days, I sit at a computer with 2 monitors, cold coffee, and a list of transactions that somebody hopes I won't examine too closely. I'm good at it because small inconsistencies bother me. A date that shifts between forms bothers me. A signature written in different ink bothers me. A receipt for an even amount from a business that always charges sales tax bothers me. Grandma said I'd found a profession built around not letting things go. Keith, my husband, says she was right. Keith teaches high school history. He's patient in a way I'm not, especially with people who ask questions they could answer by reading the email directly in front of them. We bought a small house on the west side of Kearney. It has a narrow kitchen, an uneven back patio, and a medicine cabinet that sticks when the weather gets humid. We've been talking about replacing that cabinet for almost 3 years. Our life was quiet. We worked, cooked dinner, argued about whose turn it was to buy coffee, and spent too many Saturdays fixing things at Grandma's properties. Keith never complained about that. He would carry a toolbox into one of the duplexes and say, "Which landlord emergency are we pretending I know how to solve today?" Usually it was a loose cabinet hinge or a toilet that wouldn't stop running. If it involved electricity, we called someone qualified. By early 2024, Grandma tired easily. She had good days, but even those ended around lunch. Her hands shook when she lifted her coffee. She hated that more than the pain. One afternoon in March, I went to her house to review bids for the Central Avenue building. The brick needed tuck pointing, and a plumbing problem had damaged part of the back wall. When I arrived, Zachary Wilson's car was in her driveway. Zachary had handled Grandma's estate planning for years. He was sitting at the kitchen table with a leather binder open in front of him. Grandma sat across from him in a blue cardigan holding a pen. I stopped inside the doorway. "I can come back." Grandma said, "No, sit down." Zachary closed the binder. "We've finished." I sat beside Grandma and put my bag on the floor. She looked tired, but she was clear. That matters. She asked me what I thought should happen to the Central Avenue building. I said, "We need to stabilize the back wall first. Everything else can wait. What would you do with it after that? Restore the storefronts. Keep the upstairs offices affordable. Don't turn it into luxury space nobody here needs." Zachary watched her, not me. Grandma asked, "And the duplexes? Keep enough in reserve for roofs and furnaces. Don't distribute money we'll need 6 months later." She nodded and looked at Zachary. "That's why." I didn't understand. Zachary reopened the binder. He explained that Grandma had amended the Cheryl Ann Carter Family Trust. She had named me sole successor trustee. I stared at him. "What about Dad?" Grandma answered. "Your father doesn't want it?" Dad had been helping her less by then, but I still assumed he would be named. He was her son. "What about Michelle?" Grandma gave me a long look. "What about her?" I lowered my voice. "She's going to be furious. That's not a qualification." I didn't know what to say. Being trusted felt good. It also felt like standing in a doorway while somebody rolled a storm toward me. I asked Zachary what being trustee would mean. He explained it plainly. After Grandma died, I would manage the properties for the beneficiaries. I would keep records, approve repairs, make allowed distributions, and report on the trust's condition. I would not own the properties personally. I would have a duty to protect them. The trust was worth roughly $600,000. Most of that value was tied up in real estate. That's too much, I said. Grandma tapped one finger on the table. You've already been doing the work. That's different. No, it isn't. It just didn't have a title. I looked at Zachary. Does Michelle know? No, he said. Cheryl asked that the amendment remain private for now. Grandma pushed the bid folder toward me, back wall first. That ended the conversation. For the next 16 months, almost nothing changed on the surface. I kept managing the properties. Grandma kept reviewing the reports when she felt well enough. Michelle visited on holidays and brought flowers that were usually still wrapped in grocery store plastic. Mom took pictures of those visits. She posted one with the caption, "3 generations of Carter women." I wasn't in it. I had gone to a duplex because a water heater was leaking. Grandma saw the post when I returned. You want me to say something? She asked. No. You sure? Yes. She studied my face. Then she said, all right, and handed me half her sandwich. Grandma died in July of 2025. She was 84. Her last week was quiet. I spent most evenings beside her. Dad came every afternoon and sat in the corner by the window. Mom visited with him twice. Michelle came once with Christian. Michelle stood beside Grandma's bed and said, "We'll take care of everything." Grandma's eyes opened. Lauren has it. Michelle looked at me. At the time, I thought Grandma meant I had her medication schedule or her property binder. I think Michelle thought the same thing. After the funeral, Zachary scheduled a meeting at his office. Mom, Dad, Michelle, Christian, and I sat around a polished table that was too large for the room. Keith came with me but stayed quiet. Zachary explained the trust. He said I was the sole trustee. The first formal review would occur at the 1-year anniversary of Grandma's death. Michelle interrupted him. Sorry, sole trustee. Yes. Grandma put Lauren in charge of all of it? She appointed Lauren to administer the trust. Christian leaned forward. What oversight applies? Zachary told him the trust required reports and normal fiduciary accounting. He explained that I had to act for the trust, not for myself. Michelle looked at Mom. Did you know about this? Mom shook her head. Dad stared at the table. I knew that look. He'd known something. Michelle asked, why wouldn't Grandma choose someone with legal experience? Christian put his hand over hers as if she were the one being insulted. Zachary said, Cheryl made her decision after receiving independent advice. Mom turned to me. How long have you known? Since March last year. And you didn't tell us? Grandma asked me not to. Michelle gave a short laugh. Of course she did. Keith shifted beside me. I touched his wrist under the table. I didn't want him stepping into a family argument 5 minutes after Grandma's trust became active. Mom said, Lauren, this is a lot of responsibility. Nobody's saying you can't handle paperwork, but managing family money is different. I've managed the properties for 2 years, with Grandma watching you. She reviewed my reports. I handled the work. Michelle looked at Zachary. Can this be changed? Not because a beneficiary dislikes the appointment. Her face went still. Christian asked several questions after that. He wanted to know how trustees could be removed. Zachary gave him a general answer about breach of duty, resignation, death, or incapacity. He didn't linger on any one part. I didn't either. I had no reason to. What I didn't know was that a few weeks later, Christian emailed Zachary's office asking exactly how a physician's finding of incapacity would be filed before the 1-year review. I wouldn't see that email for 10 months. By June of 2026, the trust had been operating for almost a year. The duplexes were occupied. The Central Avenue building was halfway through restoration. I had every invoice categorized and every distribution recorded. Then my hands started shaking. I'd taken propranolol for a mild essential tremor for years. It worked well. I knew what my normal felt like. This wasn't normal. The first bad episode happened at work. I was reviewing a claim when my heart started beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. My fingers trembled over the keyboard. Heat moved across my chest and up my neck. I walked to the break room, filled a paper cup with water, and sat at the small table by the vending machine. My coworker asked if I needed help. "I'm fine," I said. "Too much coffee." I hadn't finished half a cup. The episode passed after 20 minutes. I went back to my desk and completed the review. 3 days later, it happened while I was driving home. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and waited with both hands pressed against my thighs. That night, Keith watched me struggle to hold a fork steady. "You need to call your doctor." "I will." "When?" "Tomorrow." He reached across the table. "Your pulse is jumping in your wrist." I called the next morning. The earliest regular appointment was 2 weeks away. The receptionist told me to go to urgent care if the palpitations worsened. I put my propranolol bottle beside my laptop so I wouldn't forget it. The symptoms kept coming. At family dinner the following Sunday, my hand shook while I poured iced tea. The glass knocked against the pitcher. Michelle looked at me. "Are you okay?" "I've been having tremors and heart palpitations. Mom kept cutting her chicken." "That's just nerves, Lauren. You've always been like this." The table went quiet for 1 second. Then Michelle said, "You do have a lot on you." "I'm not nervous." Mom sighed. "You may not feel nervous. I know what my medication normally does." Christian glanced at Michelle. It was quick, but I saw it. Mom said, "You're managing work, the properties, Grandma's trust, and that old building. Your body's telling you to slow down." Dad asked, "Have you talked to a doctor?" "I have an appointment." Michelle reached across the table and touched my arm. "Maybe somebody should help with the trust until you feel better." I pulled my arm back to pick up my glass. "I don't need help." She smiled softly. "Nobody said you couldn't do it." That sentence stayed with me because nobody had accused me of hearing that. When Keith and I got home, he went outside to bring in the trash bins. I stood alone in our kitchen and opened the medicine cabinet. My current prescription bottle was on the middle shelf. I took it down and rolled one pill into my palm. It was the right general size. The color looked close. Under the kitchen light, though, the marking seemed wrong. I brought the pill closer to my face. Then I poured out 3 more. They all had the same unfamiliar imprint. I stood there listening to the trash bin wheels scrape across our driveway. For the first time, I wondered if the symptoms weren't coming from me at all. I put the pills on a clean saucer and took the bottle to the dining table. Keith came through the back door carrying 1 trash bin by the handle. "What are you doing? Can you look at these?" He left the bin outside and washed his hands. Then he sat across from me. I slid the saucer toward him. "What am I looking for?" "The markings." He picked up 1 pill and turned it under the light. "What should they say?" "I don't remember exactly." "That's helpful. I've never needed to memorize them." He put it down and reached for the bottle. The label had my name, my doctor's name, the prescription number, and the usual instructions. Take 1 tablet twice daily. The date showed I'd picked it up a little over 3 weeks earlier. Keith read the label twice. Could the pharmacy have changed manufacturers? That happens. Would that explain a different marking? Maybe. I wanted that to be the answer. A different manufacturer would explain the appearance. Stress could explain the rest. Mom could be rude and still accidentally be right. I opened the pharmacy website on my phone. It had a pill identification page, but the page warned that online results weren't a substitute for speaking with a pharmacist. I entered the shape, color, and letters I could read. The search returned several possibilities. None said propranolol. I tried again in case I'd mistaken a letter for a number. Same result. Keith leaned over my shoulder. "Don't take another one." I wasn't planning to. "How many have you taken from this bottle?" "I don't know." He looked at the fill date. "You take 2 a day. I know how multiplication works. I'm not testing you, Lauren. I set the phone down. Sorry. He counted the pills without touching them, moving them across the saucer with the end of a clean spoon. There were 28. If the bottle had been filled with 60, I had taken 32. My stomach dropped. Keith asked, "Have you missed any doses?" "A few. I keep some in my work bag." "From this bottle?" "I filled the little case from this bottle last Monday." He went to get my work bag from the hook by the garage door. The plastic pill case was in the front pocket. 4 tablets remained inside. They matched the ones on the saucer. Keith stood with both hands on the table. "We're going to urgent care. It's Sunday night." "That's why it's called urgent care. My heart isn't racing right now. You've taken more than 30 pills you can't identify. Over 3 weeks. That sentence isn't making me feel better." I called the nurse line first. The nurse asked what symptoms I'd had, whether I had chest pain, whether I felt faint, and whether I had taken a pill that day. I told her I had taken one with breakfast. She told me not to take anything else from the bottle. Then she told me to be evaluated that evening because of the palpitations. Keith was already getting his keys. Before we left, I took photographs, one of the label, one of the pills beside the bottle, one close enough to show the imprint. Then I placed everything in a zippered food bag. Keith watched me write the date and time on a piece of masking tape. "You're documenting it." "Yes." "You think the pharmacy made a mistake?" "I don't know what I think." That was true. At that point, I had a bottle with my name on it and pills that didn't appear to match the label. The simplest explanation was still an error. A pharmacy employee could have selected the wrong stock bottle. Someone could have poured the wrong tablets into the machine. Labels could get switched. Those things were serious, but they weren't personal. I wasn't ready to think beyond that. Urgent care was nearly empty. A television in the waiting room played a home renovation show with the sound off. Keith filled a paper cup from the water cooler while I completed the intake form. Under reason for visit, I wrote, "Palpitations and possible medication dispensing error." The medical assistant took my blood pressure twice. The first reading was high, the second was a little lower. She asked, "Are you anxious?" "I'm concerned." She looked at the bag in my hand. "That makes sense." The physician introduced herself as Dr. Hannah Cole. She listened to my heart and asked me to describe when the episodes began. I gave her the dates from my work calendar. I'd made notes after each one because I planned to discuss them at my regular appointment. She asked about caffeine, cold medicine, supplements, and changes in sleep. No new supplements, no cold medicine. 1 cup of coffee most mornings. "And this medication normally controls the tremor?" "Yes." "When did you notice it had stopped working?" "I didn't think of it that way until tonight." She put on gloves and examined the pills without removing them from the bag. "I can't identify medication by appearance alone," she said. "The pharmacy can verify the imprint and dispensing record tomorrow. So what do I do tonight? Don't take another tablet from this bottle. If you develop chest pain, shortness of breath, severe headache, or fainting, go to the emergency room." She ordered an electrocardiogram. It was normal, which helped. My pulse was still faster than usual, but not dangerous at that moment. She also documented everything I told her. I watched her type the phrase, "possible incorrect medication," into my chart. That phrase made the room feel colder. Before we left, she printed instructions and circled the pharmacy section. "Call them when they open," she said. "Ask to speak directly with the pharmacist." Keith drove home. I sat with the plastic bag in my lap. About halfway there, he said, "Your mom's comment bothered me." "Which one?" "The one about you always being like this. That's just how she talks." "No, that's how she talks to you." I looked out the window. Kearney was quiet. Most of the businesses along the road had turned off their signs. We passed a gas station, a closed tire shop, and a restaurant where one employee was stacking chairs. Keith said, "You told them you were having heart palpitations, and your mother diagnosed your personality. She doesn't like medical things. She likes medical things when they happen to Michelle." I didn't answer. 2 years earlier, Michelle had found a small lump near her collarbone. It turned out to be a harmless cyst. During the 4 days between the appointment and the result, Mom called her every morning and every evening. She brought groceries to Michelle's house and sat in the waiting room. I didn't begrudge Michelle that. She was scared. She deserved support. What bothered me was knowing exactly how Mom would have reacted if I had asked for the same thing. She would have told me not to borrow trouble. At home, I placed the bag in the top kitchen cabinet above the coffee mugs. I didn't put it back in the medicine cabinet. I didn't want either of us reaching for it from habit. Keith found my old prescription paperwork in the drawer where we kept appliance manuals and batteries. The prior fill showed the same dosage and instructions. "Do you have any old pills somewhere?" he asked. "I usually use them before opening the new bottle." "What about your desk? I cleaned it out last month." "Purse?" "No." He checked the bathroom drawer anyway. I checked my overnight bag. We found an empty bottle from winter, but no pills. The empty bottle had the same pharmacy label style. The manufacturer listed in small print near the bottom was different from the one on my current bottle. I took a picture of that, too. Keith asked, "Does that mean anything?" "Not by itself." I lined up the two bottles. The caps matched. The plastic matched. Both had the Heritage Family Pharmacy logo printed in green. The current bottle didn't look altered. The label wasn't crooked. There was no torn edge or residue beneath it. If the wrong pills had been dispensed, it had happened cleanly. If the wrong pills had entered the bottle later, I had no idea how. I slept badly. Every time I started drifting off, I noticed my heartbeat and counted it. At some point after 2 a.m, Keith reached across the bed and rested his hand over mine. "You're counting again," he said. "I'm not. You're tapping every 4th beat." I stopped moving my finger. "Try to sleep. I keep thinking about how long I've been taking them. We'll know more tomorrow. What if it was a pharmacy mistake? Then they need to know. What if it wasn't?" He was quiet for a few seconds. "Then we still need to know." That was the first time either of us said it directly. I woke before my alarm and went to the kitchen. The bag was still in the top cabinet. I checked, even though there was no reason it wouldn't be. I made tea instead of coffee and opened a blank spreadsheet on my laptop. Across the top, I entered date, time, symptom, location, medication taken, and witness. I went through my calendar and phone messages. I listed the episode at work, the grocery store parking lot, the evening with the shaking fork, and several smaller moments I had dismissed. On the day of the first episode, I had texted Keith, "Heart's being weird, probably too much coffee." On another day, I had messaged a coworker that I would join a meeting late because my hands were shaking. The symptoms formed a clear line across 3 weeks. I added the date I picked up the prescription. The first episode happened 4 days later. I stared at those 2 entries. Before the new bottle, I'd had no palpitations. That still didn't prove where the pills came from, but it changed the question. I wasn't trying to decide whether something was wrong anymore. Something was wrong. Now I needed to find out where it started. Heritage Family Pharmacy opened at 8. I called at 8:03. Alyssa answered and asked for my date of birth and prescription number. I gave both. "I need to speak directly with Rodney," I said. "Is it about a refill?" "It's about the tablets inside a bottle I picked up last month." She paused. "Are you having a reaction?" "I've had heart palpitations and tremors. An urgent care doctor told me not to take any more until the medication is verified." Her tone changed immediately. "Hold on. Don't hang up." Rodney came on less than a minute later. "This is Rodney Robles. Tell me what you're seeing." I read the imprint to him. He asked me to repeat it. Then he said, "That isn't the imprint we have listed for your dispensed propranolol." I gripped the edge of the table. Could the manufacturer have changed? Not for that, Phil. I'm looking at the record now. Keith stood on the other side of the kitchen, watching my face. Rodney asked, "Do you still have the bottle and all remaining tablets?" "Yes. Keep them together. Don't discard anything, and don't take another dose from that supply." "What are the pills?" "I don't want to identify them from a verbal description. Bring the bottle here. I'll inspect the tablets and compare them with the dispensing log." "When?" "As soon as you can." I looked at the clock. "I can be there in 20 minutes. Ask for me when you arrive." I closed my laptop and reached for the bag. Keith said, "I'm coming. You have work. So do you." I already emailed my supervisor. He had his shoes on before I could argue. The pharmacy sat on Central Avenue, a few blocks from Grandma's commercial building. It was locally owned, with 2 checkout aisles in front and the prescription counter along the back wall. Grandma had used it for years. So had my parents. Alyssa recognized me when we walked in. She was helping an older man at the register. Her eyes moved to the bag in my hand, then toward the consultation window. "Rodney's expecting you." Rodney was 52, with silver starting at his temples and reading glasses he kept pushing up with one finger. I knew him well enough to exchange greetings, but not well enough to call outside the pharmacy. He opened the consultation room and shut the door after Keith and me. "Let me see the bottle." I handed him the sealed bag. He read the label first. Then he compared the label with something on his computer. "Your prescription was for propranolol," he said. "It was filled here on the date shown. The quantity was 60. That's what I thought." He put on gloves and opened the bag. He poured 1 pill onto a small white tray, turned it over, and read the imprint beneath a bright desk lamp. His mouth tightened. "These are not your propranolol tablets," Keith asked. "Are you certain?" "Yes." "What are they?" Rodney typed the imprint into his system. He read the screen, then examined a second pill. "This imprint is used for a prescription stimulant." The room went silent. I asked, "A stimulant like what?" "Mixed amphetamine salts." I sat back. The palpitations, the shaking, the sleeplessness, the sudden heat in my chest. They all made sense at once. Keith said, "She's been taking them twice a day." Rodney looked at me. "How many doses?" I counted 32 missing from the bottle. I may have skipped a few. "Did urgent care perform an electrocardiogram?" "Yes, it was normal." "Any symptoms this morning?" "My hands are shaking a little. No chest pain." He told me to contact my doctor that day. He also repeated the warning about emergency symptoms. Then he turned his attention back to the bottle. "I need to review the fill record and our inventory reconciliation. You think this happened here?" "I'm not making that conclusion yet. What else could have happened? I need to determine what left this pharmacy in this bottle." He said each word carefully. I understood the distinction. The label proved what the pharmacy intended to dispense. The pills proved what I had now. We still didn't know when those 2 things stopped matching. Rodney printed my prescription record and marked the manufacturer information for the propranolol that should have been inside. The correct tablets for this fill had a different imprint, he said. He wrote it on the page. I asked, "Can I keep this?" "Yes." "I'm also documenting that you brought the bottle in today." He made a copy of the label and photographed the tablets. When he started to place everything behind the counter, I stopped him. "Are you keeping my bottle?" "I'd like to retain it while I review the dispensing record. I need a written receipt." He looked at me for 1 second, then nodded. "Absolutely." Keith glanced at me. He knew that tone. It was the one I used at work when somebody wanted evidence without recording custody. Rodney printed a receipt describing the bottle, label date, listed prescription, remaining tablet count, and time received. We both signed it. He gave me a copy. "I'll call you after I've checked the log." "How long will that take?" "I should know more by this afternoon." I folded the receipt and placed it in my purse. As we left the consultation room, Alyssa was sorting small white pharmacy bags into pickup bins. She looked at Rodney, then at me. "Is everything okay?" Rodney answered before I could. "I'm reviewing a dispensing concern." Alyssa nodded, but her eyes stayed on the empty plastic bag in my hand. Keith and I walked outside. The morning was already hot. Cars moved slowly along Central Avenue, and a delivery truck was blocking half the lane across from Grandma's building. Keith stopped beside our car. "Someone put amphetamines in your prescription bottle." "Yes. You could have ended up in the hospital." "I know. We should call the police." "Not yet." "Lauren, we know the pills are wrong. We don't know where it happened." He looked back at the pharmacy. "You think Rodney might be responsible?" I think I want his records before anyone has time to settle on an explanation. Keith opened the passenger door for me, but I didn't get in. I took out my phone and photographed the receipt while we were still standing in the parking lot. Then I emailed the image to myself and saved another copy to the Trust's secure document drive inside a private folder only I could access. Keith watched me do it. This is deliberate now, isn't it? I slid the phone back into my purse. Yes, I still didn't suspect Michelle. Not then. I only knew my mother had called it nerves. My sister had suggested taking work away from me, and the pills inside my bottle had been causing the exact symptoms they were using against me. That was enough for me to start paying attention. Rodney called at 12:40 that afternoon. I was sitting in my car outside my doctor's office. Keith had gone back to work after making me promise to text him the moment the appointment ended. I've reviewed the dispensing record, Rodney said. I also checked our inventory for both medications. What did you find? Our propranolol count reconciles. The stock used for your fill matches the quantity recorded. What does that mean? It means our system shows 60 propranolol tablets leaving our inventory for your prescription, but they weren't in the bottle. They aren't in the bottle now. He put a slight emphasis on now. I watched a woman push an empty shopping cart across the medical building's parking lot. Are you saying they were switched after I picked them up? I'm saying the dispensing record and inventory don't show the kind of shortage we'd expect if the wrong medication had been counted during your fill. What about the amphetamines? I can't discuss another patient's medication record with you. I can tell you our controlled inventory also reconciles, so none are missing, not according to the count. That widened the problem. If 60 propranolol tablets had been recorded properly and the controlled medication wasn't short, then this wasn't a pharmacist accidentally pouring from the wrong bottle and throwing the counts off. I asked, can inventory records be wrong? Yes. Any record can contain an error. That's why I'm reviewing the supporting information. Do you have cameras? In the dispensing area and at the pickup counter. Can you check them? I'm already working on that. The retention period varies by camera, so I can't promise the footage is still available. I closed my eyes. When can I have my bottle back? I'd like to keep it until I finish documenting the issue. I'll need another written record if you do anything beyond visual inspection. I understand. He sounded tired, but not irritated. I've prepared a replacement supply from a sealed stock bottle, he said. I also photographed the manufacturer label and lot information before filling it. You can pick that up whenever you're ready. I'll come after my appointment. My doctor was more concerned than the urgent care physician had been. She reviewed the visit notes, took my blood pressure, and asked exactly when I had last taken one of the wrong pills. Yesterday morning. Any chest pain since then? No. Trouble sleeping? Yes. Loss of appetite? I thought about it. I've been skipping lunch. She ordered blood work and told me to avoid caffeine until my pulse settled. She also wanted me to monitor my blood pressure at home for the next week. When she asked where the wrong pills were, I showed her Rodney's receipt. You asked him to document custody? Yes. Good. She entered the pharmacy details in my medical chart. Then she printed a fresh copy of my propranolol prescription in case there was any delay obtaining the replacement. Before I left, she said, Lauren, this is not a normal medication reaction. You were taking a medication that wasn't prescribed to you. My mother thought it was anxiety. Anxiety doesn't change the contents of a prescription bottle. I looked down at the papers in my lap. There it was, stated without family history or softening. I texted Keith from the parking lot. Doctor documented it, picking up correct medication now. He responded almost immediately, call after. At the pharmacy, Rodney met me at the consultation window. He gave me a sealed bag containing the replacement bottle, a medication guide, and a printed record showing there was no charge. This was filled from a newly opened manufacturer bottle, he said. He turned the prescription bottle so I could see the pills through the plastic. They were smaller and a different shade from the tablets I'd been taking. The imprint matched what he'd written on my record that morning. The difference was obvious once they were side by side in my memory. How did I not notice? Most people trust the label, he said. They don't inspect every refill unless the medication looks dramatically different. Alyssa came into the consultation area holding a clipboard. "Sorry, Rodney, I need your signature on the delivery sheet." He signed it and handed it back. She glanced at my replacement bag. "Did you get it figured out?" "Not yet," I said. She shifted the clipboard under one arm. "I thought maybe it had something to do with your sister coming in." Rodney looked up. "When was that?" Alyssa's expression changed. She seemed to realize the comment mattered. "A few weeks ago, maybe 3. "What did she do?" I asked. "She came to the pickup counter alone. I recognized her from when she comes in with your mom. What did she ask for?" Alyssa looked at Rodney before answering. She said she was grabbing something for her sister. "I didn't ask her to pick up a prescription." "I know. There wasn't anything ready under your name. I checked." "Then what did she take?" "Nothing from the pharmacy counter. She said she must have misunderstood and walked toward the front." Rodney asked, "Do you remember the date?" "Not exactly. It was a weekday because I worked the closing shift." "Was it before or after Lauren's propranolol pickup?" Alyssa thought for a moment. "After, I think." A customer pressed the service bell outside the consultation room. Rodney told Alyssa, "Write down everything you remember before you go back." She nodded and left. I stayed in my chair. Rodney closed the consultation door again. "Does your sister normally collect medication for you?" "No." "Does she have your date of birth?" "Yes. She's my sister." "Access to your home?" I looked at him. "Why?" "I'm asking about any possible route by which someone else could have handled the bottle. She's been in my house." "When?" "I don't keep a visitor log." "Recently?" "She came over in May. We had dinner. She's also house sat for us." I stopped there. Michelle had house sat months earlier when Keith and I went to Lincoln for a weekend. I'd given her a spare key because the person who usually checked our house was unavailable. I couldn't remember getting that key back. That didn't mean she had switched anything. A key sitting in her junk drawer wasn't proof of entry. Rodney said, "I'm not accusing anyone. I need to understand who could have had access. Did you see her touch my prescription?" "No." "Did Alyssa?" "Not from what she just said." "Then we don't connect those things yet." He nodded. "That's fair." I stood and picked up the replacement bag. "Please don't call my family. I won't discuss your medication with anyone you haven't authorized. What if Michelle comes back? We won't release anything without following our verification procedures. She knows my date of birth. We can add a note requiring photo identification for pickup." "Do that." He typed the note while I watched. On my way out, Alyssa caught my eye from behind the counter. She looked worried. I didn't stop to talk to her. Rodney had asked her for a written account, and I wanted the account made before memory turned into conversation. I drove home instead of returning to work. At the kitchen table, I opened my spreadsheet and added the doctor's visit, Rodney's call, and Alyssa's statement. Under the column labeled Source, I wrote only what each person had directly observed. Rodney: "Pills do not match prescribed propranolol. Pharmacy records, propranolol inventory reconciles." Alyssa: "Michelle came to pickup counter alone, approximately 3 weeks earlier, and said she was getting something for her sister." I did not write. "Michelle switched my medication." I didn't know that. I created a separate list called Questions. When did Michelle visit the pharmacy? Why did she say she was collecting something for me? Did she still have our spare key? When had she last been inside our house? Where was the bottle on those dates? I was working through my calendar when Mom called. I let it ring twice before answering. "How did your appointment go?" she asked. I hadn't told her I had an appointment that day. "Who said I had one?" "Michelle." Michelle didn't know the date. "She said you were going back to the pharmacy and seeing somebody about your heart." I looked at the replacement bottle beside my laptop. How did she know I went to the pharmacy? There was a pause. "I don't know, Lauren. Maybe you told her." I didn't. "Well, this is what I mean. You've been telling different people different pieces, and then you get upset when everyone doesn't have the full story. I've told Keith and my doctors. Your father said you seemed worked up at dinner. I had amphetamine tablets in my propranolol bottle. Mom went silent. I gave her time to respond. When she did, her voice was lower. Was it a pharmacy mistake? They're investigating. So it could be. It could be several things. You shouldn't jump to conclusions. I haven't told you any conclusion. You're asking how Michelle knew you went to the pharmacy. That was a question. She's worried about you. Then she can call me. Mom exhaled. She has tried to help, Lauren. You make it difficult because you treat every offer like criticism. What offer? Helping with the properties while you get yourself settled. My prescription was wrong. I'm not abandoning the trust. Nobody said abandoning. You called it nerves yesterday. Now you're talking about taking work away. Temporarily. There was a faint rustling on her end, like she was moving the phone. Then I heard Michelle's voice in the background. Don't argue with her. I sat still. You're with Michelle? Mom hesitated. We're having coffee. Put me on speaker. You already are. Of course I was. Michelle said, I didn't want this to become a whole thing. You went to my pharmacy. Another silence. Then she laughed lightly. What? Alyssa remembers you at the pickup counter. You said you were getting something for your sister. Oh, that. I was picking up something for Mom. I'm not Mom. I said daughter then. She must be remembering it wrong. Alyssa was 26. Mom was 63. Nobody looking at Michelle would reasonably mistake Susan for her sister. What were you picking up? Why does that matter? Because you went to my pharmacy and referred to your sister. It's our family pharmacy, Lauren. I go there all the time. What did you pick up? Mom's allergy medication. Mom cut in. I asked her to. From the prescription counter. It's kept behind the counter, Michelle said. Which medication? Why are you interrogating me? I waited. She didn't answer. Mom said, this is exactly what we're concerned about. Listen to how suspicious you sound. I asked what she picked up, and she told you. She said allergy medication. She didn't say which one. Because I don't remember the brand, Michelle said. It was weeks ago. I wrote those words into my spreadsheet while she was still speaking. Mom heard the keyboard. Are you typing? Yes. For heaven's sake, why? Because the pharmacy is investigating medication that wasn't prescribed to me. Michelle said, you're making this sound criminal. I said the pharmacy is investigating. You just accused me of going there. You did go there. To help Mom. Mom said, and now you understand. I didn't. What I understood was that Michelle had answered a simple question with 3 different explanations. She was grabbing something for her sister, then she was picking up something for Mom, then maybe she had said, daughter. The item was allergy medication, but she couldn't name it. None of that proved she had touched my bottle. It did give me a reason to stop sharing information. I said, I have to go. Michelle spoke quickly. Wait. Since we're all on the phone, we should talk about the trust review. What about it? The anniversary is coming up, I know. Christian and I think it would be smart to have a backup person added while you're dealing with this. You don't add a backup person because of a medication error. It's not just that. What else is it? Mom said. The stress. The shaking. The way you're reacting. My hand stopped above the keyboard. Michelle softened her voice. No one wants to remove you. I'm saying I could step in for a few weeks. We could present it as a family decision. Present it to whom? Zachary, the beneficiaries, whoever needs to know. You're a beneficiary. You're not a trustee. I know that. Then there's nothing to present. Michelle was quiet. Mom said, you don't have to be so rigid. I looked at the trust calendar on my second screen. The 1-year review was 5 weeks away. I'm not discussing trust administration on a speakerphone. You discuss it with Keith, Michelle said. Keith isn't trying to take it from me. Nobody answered that. I ended the call. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone began filling with messages. Mom wrote that I had misunderstood the conversation. Michelle wrote that she loved me and wouldn't let my pride damage Grandma's legacy. Christian sent a separate email. He called the proposal a temporary safeguard and asked whether I had notified Zachary of my current medical instability. I read that phrase 3 times. Then I saved every message. I exported the email as a PDF and placed it in the private folder with Rodney's receipt. At 4:20, Zachary's office called. His assistant said Michelle had requested an appointment concerning the upcoming trustee review. Did she say why? I asked. She said it involved an urgent family concern. Has Zachary agreed to meet with her? He asked me to contact you first. I looked at the unopened text from Mom. Tell him I'll be there. The appointment was set for Thursday afternoon. After I hung up, I went to the kitchen medicine cabinet and checked the top shelf where the original bottle had been. There was a faint, clean circle in the dust. The bottle had sat in the same place for weeks. Someone hadn't needed to search for it. I took a picture of the circle and closed the cabinet. Then I checked the rest of the kitchen. Nothing looked disturbed. The mugs were where they belonged. The junk drawer still caught on the same roll of tape. Our spare checks were in a locked desk drawer, and the drawer showed no damage. I opened the cabinet again. The bottle had been visible the moment anyone pulled the door. At work the next morning, I could barely focus. I reviewed the same claim twice and found myself checking my phone between every page. Rodney hadn't called. Michelle had sent one more message. Please don't make Thursday hostile. We're coming from love. I didn't respond. At lunch, Keith called from his classroom. You sound tired. I slept about 4 hours. Did you take the correct medication? Yes. Any palpitations? Not today. That's something. I looked at Christian's email on my second monitor. Do you remember Michelle returning our spare key? No. Think about it. I am. She had it when we went to Lincoln. I remember giving it to her. I don't remember her handing it back. Neither do I. He went quiet. Are you thinking she came into the house? I'm thinking I need to know who could. Do you want me to call her? No. Lauren, if she has a key to our house, I'm changing the lock. After Thursday. Why after? Because if we change it now, she'll know I'm looking at access. He didn't like that. I could hear it in the way he breathed through his nose. Finally, he said, One day. I'm changing it. Friday, that's fine. Thursday afternoon, I arrived at Wilson Estate Law 15 minutes early. Zachary's office was on the second floor of a brick building near the courthouse. The waiting room had 2 brown chairs, a fake plant, and a table covered with financial magazines nobody touched. Michelle and Christian arrived together. Michelle wore a cream blouse and carried a leather folder. Christian had a yellow legal pad tucked under his arm. They looked prepared for a meeting I hadn't agreed to have. Hi, Michelle said. I nodded. Christian sat across from me. Is Keith coming? No. Probably better, he said. I looked at him. For privacy. Keith knows about the trust. He isn't a beneficiary. Neither are you. Michelle touched his knee. Can we not start like this? I haven't started anything. Mom arrived 2 minutes later. I hadn't known she was coming. She sat beside Michelle and took her hand. That left the chair beside me empty. Zachary's assistant opened the inner door and invited us into the conference room where we'd met after Grandma died. Zachary came in carrying the trust binder. He looked around the table. Before we begin, Lauren, did you consent to Susan attending? Mom's mouth opened. I said, she can stay. He nodded and sat at the head of the table. Michelle requested this meeting. Michelle, tell us what you want to discuss. Michelle opened her folder. We're concerned Lauren is overwhelmed. Zachary waited. Michelle seemed to expect a question. When he didn't ask one, she continued. She's been having medical issues, tremors, racing heart, anxiety. She went to urgent care. Mom added, she hasn't been sleeping. I looked at her. You don't know how I've been sleeping. You told me you weren't feeling well. I didn't tell you about my sleep. Christian said, the point is that there's a pattern. He turned his legal pad toward Zachary. There were 6 dated entries. I could read the first 3 from where I sat. Family dinner, urgent care, pharmacy concern. He had made a timeline of my symptoms. Zachary asked, what action are you requesting? A temporary co-trustee appointment, Christian said. Michelle can assist until the annual review. The trust does not provide for beneficiaries to appoint an informal co-trustee. We understand that. Then what are you asking me to do? Christian glanced at Michelle. She said, "We're asking you to encourage Lauren to step aside voluntarily." Zachary turned to me. "Do you intend to resign?" "No." Mom squeezed Michelle's hand. We knew she'd say that. Zachary looked back at Christian. "Do you have evidence that Lauren has failed to perform any trustee duty?" Christian tapped his legal pad. "She's experiencing symptoms that affect judgment and concentration. That isn't what I asked. There have been delays at the Central Avenue project. I said the drywall inspection moved by 2 days because the city inspector was unavailable. Michelle said, 'You didn't tell us that. You aren't managing the project. We're beneficiaries. You receive quarterly reports.' Christian said, 'The next report isn't due for another month, and the inspection delay didn't change cost or completion.' Zachary made a note. 'What else?' Michelle shifted in her chair. She missed a call from the roofing contractor. He called while I was at urgent care. I returned it the next morning. You didn't tell him you were having a medical emergency. I told him I was unavailable. Mom said, 'Listen to how defensive this is getting.'" Zachary raised one hand. "Susan, this is a trust administration meeting. Lauren is answering questions about specific duties." Mom leaned back. Michelle's face tightened. Christian said, "The trust permits removal if the trustee becomes incapacitated." My skin went cold. He knew the exact provision. Zachary's expression didn't change. "Do you have a licensed physician's finding of incapacity?" "Not yet." The last 2 words landed strangely. "Not yet." Zachary closed his pen. "Then there is no incapacity issue before me." "We're trying to prevent a crisis," Michelle said. "What crisis?" "She was taking the wrong medication. I hadn't told Michelle the pharmacy confirmed that." I looked at Mom. Mom shook her head before I asked. "I only told her what you told us. I said there were amphetamine tablets in my bottle. I didn't tell you Rodney confirmed the dispensing record." Christian's pen stopped. Michelle said, "Rodney?" "The pharmacist." "I know who Rodney is." "Then why did you ask?" "I didn't ask anything." Zachary watched us. "I took Rodney's receipt from my purse and placed it in front of me, not in the center of the table. The tablets in my propranolol bottle were a prescription stimulant. My doctor documented the resulting symptoms. Since I stopped taking those tablets, the symptoms have improved." Michelle stared at the receipt. "Can I see that?" "No." "If you want us to understand, you can't hide information." "I'm not asking you to understand. Mom said my name in the warning tone she'd used my entire life." Zachary asked, "Is the pharmacy investigating?" "Yes." "Have they reached a conclusion?" "Not yet." Christian sat back. "This actually reinforces our concern. If Lauren can't keep track of her medications, how can she manage $600,000 in assets?" I looked at him. "My prescription bottle contained the wrong pills. After being in your custody." Nobody spoke. That was the first time anyone had said it that way. He knew where the weak point was. The pharmacy records showed what should have left the counter. The bottle had been in my possession for weeks. If the pharmacy denied making the mistake, Michelle and Christian could say I had mixed up my own medication. Then they could use the confusion as more evidence against me. Zachary asked Christian, "Are you alleging Lauren changed the contents herself?" "No. Of course not." "Then state what you are alleging." Christian looked down at his notes. "We're alleging she may not be functioning at full capacity." Mom said, "That's all." Zachary turned to me. "Would you like the meeting to continue?" "No." He closed the trust binder. "Then we're done. There is no basis for a trustee change. The scheduled review remains in July." Michelle pushed her chair back. "You won't even consider what happens if she gets worse. If you obtain legitimate evidence that Lauren cannot perform her duties, provide it through the proper process." Christian nodded as if he'd been given instructions. Zachary saw it too. He added, "That was not an invitation to manufacture a record." Michelle stood. "That's insulting. So is asking a trustee to resign without evidence of a single administrative failure." Mom left with them. She didn't look at me. Zachary waited until the outer door closed. Then he said, "Sit for a minute." I sat. He reopened the binder to a marked page. The incapacity language is standard. A licensed physician would need to make a finding, and it would need to be filed with my office before the review. Could they force me to see a doctor? No. Could they use the urgent care records? Not without access, and those records do not say you're incapacitated. I looked at the closed door. Christian said, "Not yet." I heard him. "Has he asked you about that provision before?" Zachary considered the question. "I need to review the correspondence file before I answer." That wasn't a no. He looked at Rodney's receipt. "Keep every record. Don't give them originals." "I won't. And if you believe someone altered your medication, treat that as a safety issue first." "I am." When I reached the parking lot, Keith was waiting in his car. He'd driven over after work without telling me. I got into the passenger seat. "How bad?" he asked. Christian made a timeline of my symptoms. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. For what? To argue I'm not functioning at full capacity. Based on medication somebody switched? He said the bottle was in my custody. Keith stared through the windshield. Then he said, "We're changing the lock now. We stopped at a hardware store on the way home." Keith bought a new deadbolt and 2 extra keys. He installed it while I searched the house again. I checked coat pockets, bathroom drawers, luggage, the work bag, and the small lockbox in our bedroom. No old medication. Then I remembered the glove box. I had kept a bottle in the car during a work trip that spring. I thought I'd brought it inside, but I hadn't checked. The glove box was packed with napkins, insurance papers, a tire pressure gauge, and 2 pairs of sunglasses I never wore. Behind the owner's manual, I found a prescription bottle. It was an older propranolol fill. It was half full. I carried it inside with both hands. Keith was tightening the last screw in the deadbolt. "Found something?" I set the bottle on the kitchen table. The label showed the fill immediately before my current one. I opened it and poured out 1 pill. It matched the correct replacement Rodney had given me. Same size, same color, same imprint. I checked the date. The prior fill had covered the months before my symptoms began. The pills remaining in the glove box were untouched by whatever had happened inside our house. I called Rodney before the pharmacy closed. He asked me to bring the bottle in the next morning. "I want to compare the manufacturer information with the earlier dispensing record," he said. "Will that tell us anything?" "It can confirm whether the prior supply matches what our system says you received." The next morning, he inspected the old bottle in front of me. He checked the prescription number, manufacturer entry, and tablet imprint. "This is correct," he said. "This prior fill matches our record. So I was taking propranolol until the new bottle." "Yes." He printed the earlier dispensing entry and attached it to a written description of the tablets. I asked for both bottles to be listed separately. He did that. Outside, I sat in my car and laid the records across the passenger seat. 1 bottle contained the medication I had taken safely for years. The next contained a stimulant. The change had occurred within a narrow stretch of days. I went through my calendar again. I had picked up the new prescription on a Thursday evening. For the next 3 days, I used the last tablets in my weekly case. Those had been filled from the older supply. On Monday morning, I refilled the case from the new bottle in the medicine cabinet. My first heart episode happened that Friday. Then I found a text from Michelle sent on Sunday afternoon, the day before I filled the case. "Use the spare key. Left Grandma's blue casserole dish on your counter. You 2 weren't home." Keith and I had been at the Central Avenue building with the plumber. I scrolled farther. I had replied, "Thanks." Michelle had been inside our house during the only open window between the correct medication and the wrong tablets entering my weekly case. She hadn't called first. She hadn't knocked while we were home. She had used a key. She was supposed to return months earlier. If that would have changed how you saw the situation, leave the word key in the comments. I called Keith. "Do you remember the blue casserole dish? The one from your grandma's kitchen?" Michelle returned it the weekend after I picked up the prescription. He was silent. "She used the spare key," I said. "While we were at Central?" "Yes." "Was the bottle already in the medicine cabinet?" "Yes." Did anyone else enter the house? No. I could hear students talking somewhere behind him. A door closed and the sound disappeared. What are you going to do? He asked. I'm not calling her. Good. I need to know why she went into the pharmacy. I need to know what Christian has been asking Zachary, and I need to know whether they've talked to a doctor. Keith said, You believe she did it now? I looked at the 2 dispensing records. I believe she had access at the exact time it could have happened. That wasn't my question. No. It took me a moment to say the rest. I think my sister put those pills in my bottle. The position I'd been defending no longer made sense. This wasn't about proving I was healthy enough to keep working. If I was right, Michelle and Christian had caused the symptoms first. Then they had written them down. I took the afternoon off and drove to Wilson Estate Law. Zachary had left a message while I was talking to Keith. He said he'd reviewed the correspondence file and wanted me to see something before the annual report was finalized. His assistant led me to a smaller office with a scanner, 2 filing cabinets, and stacks of trust documents on a side table. Zachary was already there. He had the shared case correspondence file open in front of him. Did Christian contact you before Thursday? I asked. Not directly. Michelle made the appointment through my assistant. You said you were reviewing older correspondence. He nodded. I found the inquiry I was remembering. He turned the laptop toward me. The email was dated August 18th of 2025, a few weeks after Grandma's funeral. It came from Christian's personal address. The subject line read, Trustee Incapacity Procedure. I read the first paragraph. Christian had described himself as the husband of a beneficiary. He said he was helping the family understand the trust in case questions arose during its first year. Then he asked how a licensed physician's finding of incapacity would be filed. His next question was whether the finding needed to describe a permanent condition or if temporary impairment would qualify. After that, he asked whether the acting trustee would be notified before or after control transferred. I looked up. What did you tell him? That I couldn't advise him as a non-client. I gave a short explanation of the document language and told him any challenge would require actual evidence. Did he respond? Once. Zachary opened the next message. Christian had asked whether the annual review created a deadline for raising incapacity concerns. He also asked who would manage the properties if I were removed before that review. That was 10 months before my pills changed. I read the message again. He wasn't reacting to anything I'd done. No, I'd been trustee for less than a month. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Zachary leaned back. Because beneficiaries and their relatives ask hypothetical questions after a trust becomes active. Most of those questions go nowhere. At the time, you had no health issue, no administrative problem, and no conflict before me, but you saved it. All trust-related correspondence is saved. I looked at the printed case file beside him. I want a paper copy. I expected you would. He printed the full email chain, including the message headers and his replies. Then he signed a cover page stating the copies came from the trust's shared correspondence file. I read Christian's first email one more time. He had used Grandma's full trust name. He had quoted the incapacity provision almost word for word. He had a copy of the trust. Michelle received the beneficiary disclosure after Cheryl's death, so he read it and found the removal language. That appears to be what happened. I placed the emails beside Rodney's receipt. Did he ask about anything else? Zachary opened another message from the same week. Christian wanted to know whether a replacement trustee could authorize the sale of real property before the first annual review. That question was less specific. It was also worse. Did Grandma require a sale? No. Does the trust require a large distribution in July? No. It allows distributions, but the trustee must maintain reasonable reserves and protect the income-producing property. That's why they need me out. Zachary didn't answer immediately. It may be part of their reason. Christian asked how to remove me. Then he asked whether whoever replaced me could sell the buildings. That's what the emails show. I thought about the Central Avenue property. The restoration had cost more than expected because of the damaged back wall. I had suspended all non-essential distributions until we knew the final cost. Michelle complained about that in every quarterly call. She called the reserve excessive. Christian called it dead money. Grandma had called it how roofs got paid for. I asked, if Michelle became co-trustee, could she sell the building? Not by herself if you remained trustee. If you were removed and she were appointed, she could propose a sale. She would still have fiduciary duties, but she'd control the timing. Yes, and the distributions. Within the trust terms. I gathered the papers. What are we preparing today? The routine annual distribution report. My assistant said you requested the correspondence file because you wanted all beneficiary communications attached. I do. He handed me another folder. Most of it was ordinary. Questions about rental income. A request from Michelle for a larger distribution. Christian asking whether renovation costs could be postponed. One message from April stood out. Christian had written that the family's financial needs should take priority over an unnecessarily ambitious commercial restoration. I had never seen that email. He sent this to you instead of me. He asked whether I could direct you to reduce the project budget. I told him I could not. Did he say what financial needs? No. There was an attachment. It was a proposal Christian had prepared for selling the Central Avenue building after the review. The estimate came from an online valuation, not an appraisal. He had subtracted taxes and closing costs, then divided the remaining amount into beneficiary shares. Michelle's projected distribution was just over $100,000. At the bottom, Christian had typed, "Would resolve current obligations." I pointed to the sentence, "What obligations?" I don't know. I did know one thing. People who aren't desperate don't plan how to sell somebody else's building before the restoration is finished. I asked Zachary to print that email too. He did. Before I left, he said, "Do not confront them with these yet." I wasn't planning to. You need evidence connecting the medication issue to the trust issue. These messages show interest and timing. They don't show who altered the bottle. I know. The words came out sharper than I intended. Zachary nodded toward the stack in my hand. That distinction is going to matter. I drove to the Central Avenue building and parked behind it. The plumber had left the back door propped open with a bucket. Inside, the restored brick walls were still bare. The front windows let in enough afternoon light to show dust floating over the floor. I went upstairs to the small office I used for trust records. Grandma's old metal desk sat beneath the window. We'd moved it from her house after she died. I put Christian's emails on the desk and read them in order. August, how to file incapacity. August, whether removal could happen before review. August, whether a replacement could sell property. April, whether the restoration could be cut. May, a projected sale and distribution. June, a timeline of my symptoms. It wasn't one bad decision. It was a sequence. My phone rang. Dad's name appeared on the screen. I answered. "Where are you?" he asked. "At Central. Is anyone with you?" "No, I'm coming over." He ended the call before I could ask why. Dad arrived 10 minutes later. He came through the back door carrying 2 paper cups from a convenience store. He handed me one. "Coffee?" "I'm avoiding caffeine." "Oh." He set both cups on the windowsill. He looked older than he had at the trust meeting. His shoulders seemed lower. "Your mother said you accused Michelle of changing your medicine. I said Michelle had access to my house." "Did she?" "Yes." He rubbed one hand over his jaw. "What did the pharmacy say?" The tablets were amphetamines. They weren't my prescription. He sat in Grandma's desk chair. Could it have been a mistake? The pharmacy's counts match. The prior bottle matches. The current one doesn't. Dad looked at the papers on the desk. "What are those?" "Emails from Christian." I gave him the August inquiry. He read slowly. When he reached the question about removing me before the review, he stopped. This was right after Mom died. "Yes." He was already asking? "Yes." Dad lowered the paper. "Lauren, there's something you need to know." I waited. He folded the email along an existing crease, then flattened it again. Michelle and Christian are in trouble financially. How much trouble? I don't know the full amount. What do you know? He looked toward the open office door. Last winter, they asked us for $30,000. For what? Credit cards, a home equity payment, some tax issue Christian said was being handled. Did you give it to them? Your mother did. From where? Our savings. I sat across from him. You agreed to that. I agreed to 10. Susan transferred 25 before we finished talking about it. Did Michelle pay any of it back? No. Did you ask? Of course I asked. What did she say? That she'd settle everything after the trust review. I looked at the projected sale attached to Christian's email. Did she tell you she was getting a distribution? She said the family properties would be reorganized in July. Reorganized how? She said the commercial building could be sold and everyone would receive their proper share. There was no required sale. I know that now. You knew I was restoring it. I knew. I thought maybe the trust required a review of the property. It requires a review of my administration. Dad picked up his coffee, then remembered I wasn't drinking it, and put it down again. She said you were refusing reasonable distributions because you wanted to control everything. Did you believe her? I didn't know what to believe. That meant yes, at least for a while. I asked, what did Mom know? All of it. The debt? Yes. The plan to remove me? He stared at the floor. Not at first. When? A few months ago, Michelle started saying you weren't handling the pressure well. Your mother said maybe the trust should have gone to someone older. Michelle is 4 years older. I know. Did they discuss incapacity? I heard Christian use the word once. When? April. Maybe early May. They were at our house. I came into the kitchen and they stopped talking. What exactly did you hear? Christian said they needed documentation before the anniversary. I didn't move. Dad continued. Your mother told me it was about making sure there was a backup plan. And you accepted that? I let her end the conversation. That's not the same thing. No. He said it quietly. I put Christian's symptom timeline beside the August email. Did Mom know about the medication? Dad's face changed. I don't know. Think carefully. She knew Michelle had been to your house. When did she know? The day it happened. How? Michelle stopped by our place afterward. She had Grandma's casserole dish in the car. She told me she left it on my counter. Dad frowned. She still had it when she came over. The room went very still. Are you sure? It was the blue one with the white flowers. Your mother asked why she hadn't left it with you. Michelle said she forgot. The casserole dish had appeared on my kitchen counter 2 days later. I remembered because Keith asked where it came from. I assumed Michelle had left it during the first visit and one of us hadn't noticed. She had entered my house on Sunday with the dish, left with it, and returned sometime later. The text didn't document one entry. It gave her cover for more than one. Dad looked at the pharmacy papers. What are you thinking? That she used Grandma's dish to explain why she was in my house. He stood. No. I let him sit with the word. He shook his head. Your sister is selfish. She lies. She's taken money from us. But changing medication is different. Yes. Your mother couldn't know about that. I didn't say she did. She wouldn't protect Michelle if she knew. I looked at him. He stopped. We both remembered Mom calling it nerves after I told her my heart was racing. We both remembered her sitting beside Michelle at Zachary's office. We both remembered her arguing that the symptoms made me unfit. Dad walked to the front window. What are you going to do? I'm going to finish the annual report. That's it? I'm going to find proof that doesn't depend on what I remember or what you think Michelle meant. He turned back. And if you find it? Then they don't get to call this a family misunderstanding. After he left, I added his information to my timeline. I kept his statements separate from the documents. Michelle and Christian needed money. Susan had given them $25,000 from my parents' savings. Michelle expected to repay it with a trust distribution. Christian had planned a sale that could put more than $100,000 in their hands. They could not force that sale while I controlled the trust. They had found the incapacity clause within weeks of Grandma's death. They had waited until the review deadline was close. Then I developed symptoms that looked like anxiety, poor concentration, and physical instability. The wrong medication hadn't created an opportunity. The opportunity had been identified first. The medication created the evidence they needed. Rodney called the following morning and asked me to come in after closing. His voice was different. He didn't sound uncertain anymore. "What did you find?" I asked. "I'd rather explain it in person. Can Keith come?" "Yes." The pharmacy closed at 6. Keith and I arrived at 6:15 and used the side entrance near the delivery window. Alyssa let us in. The checkout lights were off, but the back counter and dispensing area were still bright. She locked the door behind us. "Rodney's in the consultation room," she said. She looked like she wanted to tell me something. Instead, she handed me a visitor badge and returned to the counter. Rodney had my original bottle inside a clear evidence bag. It was sealed with numbered tape and marked with the date I surrendered it. Beside it were photographs, dispensing logs, and 2 manufacturer records. He asked us to sit. "I finished tracing the tablets," he said. Keith pulled his chair closer to mine. Rodney placed an enlarged photograph on the table. It showed one of the stimulant tablets beneath a magnifying lens. I could see the imprint we'd already identified. Along the beveled edge was a much smaller manufacturer stamp I hadn't noticed. Rodney pointed to it. "This is the physical lot number. I thought lot numbers were only on the manufacturer's container. Usually that's where we read them. This manufacturer also stamps a shortened lot identifier on the tablet edge for controlled product verification. You need magnification to see it clearly." He moved his finger beneath the enlarged markings. Then Rodney read the lot number aloud. He didn't rush. He read each letter and number separately, then checked it against the manufacturer record. "The pills inside your bottle came from this lot," he said. He turned over the first dispensing log. "Your propranolol prescription was filled on Thursday, May 21st. The propranolol stock bottle used for that fill had a different manufacturer, different product code, and different lot number. I understand that part. This is the part that matters. Heritage Pharmacy did not receive the amphetamine lot until Friday, May 22nd, the day after I picked up my prescription." I looked at Keith. He was already reading ahead. Rodney continued. "The shipment was checked into controlled inventory at 9:14 Friday morning. Before that time, no tablets from this lot were physically present in our pharmacy. Then they couldn't have gone into my bottle when it was filled. No." It was the first direct answer I'd gotten. Rodney placed the shipping record beside my pickup record. My bottle had left the pharmacy almost 16 hours before that amphetamine lot arrived. A dispensing error was no longer possible. He showed me another document. Because this is a controlled medication, each quantity is tracked from receipt through dispensing. This stock bottle contained the exact quantity entered here. The full quantity was dispensed in one prescription on Saturday morning. To whom? Rodney folded his hands. "I couldn't tell you that when you first came in. I needed to verify the safety reporting rules and speak with the pharmacy board's compliance line." My throat tightened. "Can you tell me now? I can identify the source relevant to the medication exposure because there is evidence of intentional tampering and an ongoing safety concern." He turned the final page toward me. The patient name was printed near the top. Christian McGee. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Keith read the name and sat back. I kept looking at it. The prescription was for mixed amphetamine salts. It had been filled the Saturday before Michelle used her spare key to enter my house. Rodney said, "The manufacturer, lot, dosage, imprint, and physical stamp all match the tablets inside your bottle." Who picked up Christian's prescription? The pickup record shows Christian. Was Michelle with him? The camera at that register had already overwritten the footage. The record only confirms whose identification was entered. I touched the edge of the page. Could these pills have come from someone else with the same medication? Not from this pharmacy's inventory. This specific lot was dispensed here only once. What about another pharmacy? That's why the cross-pharmacy batch record took longer. He showed me a manufacturer distribution report and a state batch tracking entry. The same lot had been shipped to several pharmacies in Nebraska. None of the other pharmacies near Kearney had dispensed the matching dosage during the relevant period. Keith asked, "How certain are you?" Rodney looked at him. The pills in Lauren's bottle came from the same manufacturer lot as the medication dispensed to Christian McGee. Could the pharmacy have put some of Christian's pills in Lauren's bottle later? Lauren's bottle was already in her possession. It wasn't returned until she brought it to me after the symptoms began. So somebody took pills from Christian's prescription and put them into her bottle. That is what the records indicate. I asked, "What happened to my propranolol?" "I can't determine that from pharmacy records. 60 correct tablets had left the pharmacy. They were gone now. Someone had removed them and replaced them with 60 tablets from Christian's prescription. The quantity mattered. This wasn't a person dropping one wrong pill into a bottle by accident. Someone had emptied the entire prescription and refilled it. I thought about Michelle standing in our kitchen with the medicine cabinet open. I thought about the casserole dish she had carried away, then returned later. It was large enough to hold 2 prescription bottles without anyone seeing them." Rodney slid a written report across the table. "I've documented the chain of events I can verify." The report was on pharmacy letterhead. It listed the prescription dates, product descriptions, lot identifiers, inventory entries, and the time I surrendered the altered bottle. It stated that the amphetamine lot was not present at Heritage when my propranolol was filled. It stated that the matching lot was later dispensed to Christian. It stated that the contents of my bottle must have changed after pickup. Rodney had signed and dated each page. Attached were certified copies of the relevant logs. Information unrelated to the 2 prescriptions was redacted. I read the conclusion twice. "This is mine? This is your copy. I'm retaining the original report and the bottle. I need you to describe how the bottle will be stored. It will remain sealed in our controlled evidence cabinet. Access is logged." Alyssa entered with a second envelope. "This has my written statement," she said. She placed it beside Rodney's report. Her statement gave the approximate date Michelle came to the pharmacy. After checking her work schedule and register activity, Alyssa had narrowed it to Monday, May 25th. Michelle came to the counter and said she was picking something up for her sister. Alyssa found nothing ready under my name. Michelle then said she might have the wrong day and left the pharmacy area. "Did she give you my full name?" I asked. Alyssa nodded. "It's in the statement." "Did she ask about the propranolol?" "Not directly." "What did she ask?" "She wanted to know whether you'd already collected your latest refill." Rodney looked at her. "That wasn't in the first note." I remembered it after I checked the register screen. "I searched your profile because she asked whether you had picked it up. Did you tell her?" "The screen showed it had been sold." I said, "It looks like she already got it." "Did Michelle ask what day?" "Yes." "Did you tell her?" Alyssa looked down. "I did." "I'm sorry. She knew your name and date of birth. I thought she was helping you. You didn't give her medication." "No." "Did you print anything?" "No." "Did she see the screen?" "I don't think so." Rodney added, "We've changed the note on your profile. No information or pickup can be provided to anyone but you without written authorization." I read Alyssa's statement. Michelle hadn't wandered into the pharmacy for Mom's allergy medication. She had checked whether my new bottle was already inside my house. Then she used the spare key. The exact order was finally clear. Christian's prescription was filled Saturday morning. Michelle questioned Alyssa on Monday. She entered my house that afternoon while Keith and I were at Central Avenue. She still had Grandma's casserole dish afterward. Sometime before Tuesday morning, she returned and left the dish on my counter. By Tuesday, the stimulant tablets were in my weekly case. Rodney said, "I'm required to report suspected prescription tampering involving a controlled medication." "To whom?" "The state pharmacy board and local law enforcement." "When?" "I made the preliminary notification this afternoon. The written report will be transmitted tomorrow." Keith asked, "Will they contact Lauren?" "They may. She's the person exposed to the medication. Will they contact Christian? That decision isn't mine. I said, I don't want anyone warned before the evidence is secured. Rodney nodded toward the sealed bottle. It's secured. Could Christian claim someone stole his prescription? He can make any statement he chooses. The record will show when it was dispensed. Investigators can ask what he did with it afterward. What about Michelle? Alyssa's statement documents her conduct here. Your house access records are separate. They're text messages. Preserve the original messages on your phone. I have. Rodney gave me the number assigned to the pharmacy report. He also wrote down the board reference number and the name of the local department receiving the referral. I photographed every page before placing the documents in the envelope. Keith watched me. You're not putting those in the trust drive, are you? No. Michelle knew enough about Grandma's records to guess where I stored trust documents. She didn't have my password, but I wasn't taking chances. On the drive home, we stopped at a bank branch with evening lobby hours. I rented a small safe deposit box in my name and placed the pharmacy report, Alyssa's statement, the old prescription record, and Christian's printed emails inside. I kept copies in a locked file at work. Keith saved encrypted scans on a drive he stored in his classroom desk. The only document I carried home was Rodney's replacement prescription record. That evening, Mom called 3 times. I didn't answer. Michelle sent a message asking whether I was still pursuing the pharmacy thing. I saved it without responding. Christian emailed Zachary and copied me. He requested that the July review be held during Grandma's memorial dinner at the restored Central Avenue building. He said a family setting might make the discussion less adversarial. I read the email at our kitchen table. Keith stood behind me. They want the review in public, he said. They want me cornered in public. Are you going? I looked at the report number written in my notebook. Yes. You're going to show them? Not yet. The lot number proved where the pills came from. Alyssa's statement placed Michelle at the pharmacy. Her text placed her inside my house. Christian's emails established that they had been planning to use incapacity before I ever became sick. I had what I needed. They didn't know that. For the first time since my hand shook at dinner, that difference belonged to me. I answered Christian's email the next morning. I'll attend the memorial dinner and scheduled review. That was all I wrote. Michelle responded within 4 minutes. Thank you. This is the right choice. She thought agreeing to attend meant agreeing with her. Mom called that afternoon. I'm glad you're being reasonable, she said. I said I'd attend. That's what I mean. Who's coming? Family. Zachary. Keith, if you want him there. Keith is my husband. He'll be there. Of course. I only meant this is primarily a Carter matter. Christian will be there. He's helping Michelle. I waited. Mom changed the subject. We're having chicken because it was your grandmother's favorite. Grandma's favorite was pot roast. She liked chicken. She tolerated chicken. Mom made an irritated sound. This is supposed to be a nice evening. Then why is Zachary attending? For the review was supposed to happen at his office. Michelle thought the building would be more meaningful. The restoration was still under my control. Michelle had chosen a trust asset as the place to argue that I couldn't manage the trust. I asked, did she arrange access with the contractor? She said Christian handled it. He can't authorize use of the building. Lauren, it's a family dinner. It's an active work site until the final inspection. The upstairs offices were complete. The ground floor still needed trim, light fixtures, and final cleaning. It was safe, but I carried the liability. I'll arrange access, I said. Mom sounded relieved. Good, see? This is what happens when everyone cooperates. I called the contractor after we hung up. He said Christian had contacted him that morning and claimed the family wanted the front room for a private event. The contractor had refused without my approval. I thanked him and set rules for the dinner. No access to the unfinished rear rooms, no candles, no food near the new electrical panels, everyone out by 10. Then I sent the rules to the family group. Michelle replied with a heart. For the next 3 weeks, she behaved as if our conflict had disappeared. She sent menu options. She asked which pictures of Grandma should be displayed. She suggested placing copies of the restoration plans near the entrance so relatives could see what the family had accomplished. I corrected that phrase. The trust funded the work. The contractors completed it. She didn't respond. My symptoms continued improving. After a week on the correct propranolol, the palpitations stopped. My hands returned to their usual slight tremor. My doctor documented the change. She wrote that the symptoms were consistent with unintended stimulant exposure and had resolved after the incorrect medication was discontinued. She did not write anxiety. She did not write incapacity. I placed her statement in the safe deposit box with the pharmacy report. Rodney called once to confirm the state pharmacy board had received his referral. Local police had also opened a report and requested custody documentation for the bottle. Nobody contacted Michelle while I was present. I didn't ask them to delay. I also didn't tell my family the report existed. Zachary called 1 week before the dinner. I received a document from Christian, he said. What kind of document? He's calling it a petition for temporary co-trusteeship. Is it valid? Not as submitted. Does it include a physician's finding? No. What does it include? A description of your recent behavior, signed by Michelle and Susan. I stood beside the kitchen sink watching water drip from the faucet. What behavior? Physical shaking, an urgent care visit, alleged medication confusion, sleep problems, and what they describe as increased suspicion toward family members. Anything about failed trustee duties? The delayed contractor call and the rescheduled inspection. Both were resolved. I know. Why are you attending the dinner if the petition isn't valid? Christian requested that I receive the final version during the review. I also represent the trust. If beneficiaries intend to make allegations publicly, I want an accurate record of what they say. Have you told them it's invalid? I said I would evaluate whatever they submit. That explained their confidence. They had heard only that he would evaluate it. I asked, if I give you documents at the review, will you examine them there? If they relate directly to the petition. They will. He paused. Is this about the pharmacy investigation? Yes. Do you want to give them to me before the dinner? No. You understand that surprises can complicate legal decisions. I'm not asking you to make a legal decision without reading them. What are you asking? I'm asking you to let Michelle and Christian state their basis first. Zachary was quiet, then he said, I can do that. Randy came to the house 2 nights before the dinner. Keith was grading papers at the dining table. Dad stood in the kitchen and turned his new spare key over in his hand. I'd given one to my parents years earlier. After changing the lock, I gave Dad the replacement directly. Mom didn't have one. Dad asked, does Susan know you changed the lock? I don't know. Michelle does. How? She tried her key. I looked at him. When? Last weekend. Did she tell you why she was here? She said she wanted to leave a box of Grandma's photographs. Did she call me? No. Did she leave the box? No. Dad rubbed the edge of the key with his thumb. She told your mother you locked her out because you're paranoid. Did you tell Mom why I changed it? I said it was your house. That wasn't my question. No, I didn't tell her. Keith looked up from the papers but didn't speak. Dad said, I don't know how to handle your mother right now. You could tell her the truth. Which part? The part where Michelle's financial problems started this. The part where Christian asked about incapacity after Grandma died. The part where Michelle entered my house twice. Your mother won't believe the last part without proof. I have proof. Dad looked at me. What kind? The kind they can't explain away. He waited for more. I didn't give it to him. Are you going to show it at the dinner? He asked. Yes. Should I warn Susan? No, she's your mother, and I'm her daughter. He looked down at the key again. If she knows enough to sign Christian's petition, she knows enough to stop. Dad nodded once. What do you need me to do? Answer honestly if Zachary asks you something. That's all? That's all. On the afternoon of the dinner, I left work early and went to the bank. I removed one certified copy of Rodney's findings, Alyssa's statement, Christian's August emails, the proposed Central Avenue sale, and my doctor's letter. I arranged them by date inside a plain blue folder. Keith came home at 5. He changed into a button-down shirt and found me sitting on the edge of our bed with the folder beside me. "You ready?" he asked. "No." "Do you want me to carry it?" "No." He sat beside me. "What do you want me to do if your mother starts in?" "Nothing." "What if Christian takes the folder?" "He won't. You sound certain." "I made copies." "That's not what I meant." "I know." He put his hand over mine. "We can leave whenever you want. I'm the trustee. It's my review. Then we leave whenever you decide it's finished." I picked up the folder. On the drive to Central Avenue, I rehearsed the conversation in my head. I tried different versions. I imagined telling Michelle exactly what I thought of her. I imagined asking Mom how many symptoms I needed before she would take me seriously. I imagined reading every email aloud and making Christian explain each sentence. By the time we turned onto Central Avenue, I knew none of that would help. If I sounded angry, they would call it instability. If I argued every detail, they would turn the evening into another debate. I decided to let the documents speak in the order they were created: access, medication, lot number, motive. The front windows of the building were lit when we arrived. Michelle had arranged framed pictures of Grandma along one wall. Most were holiday photographs. In nearly every one, Michelle stood beside her. The downstairs room held 3 long tables covered with white cloths. About a dozen adult relatives were already there, along with Mom, Dad, Christian, and Zachary. No one mentioned the unfinished trim. Mom kissed my cheek. "You look better," she said. "I am." Did the anxiety medication help? It wasn't anxiety medication. She pressed her lips together. "Not tonight." Michelle approached carrying a glass of iced tea. "I saved you a seat." She pointed to the center table. My chair was directly across from Zachary. Christian sat at the end with his leather case on the floor. Keith pulled out my chair. I placed the blue folder across my knees. Michelle noticed it. "What's that?" "Trust documents." Her eyes stayed on the folder for a moment. Then she smiled. "Good. We should all be prepared." Dinner began at 6:30. The chicken was dry, the roasted potatoes were good. Mom had ordered a sheet cake with Grandma's full name written in blue icing. People talked about Grandma's kitchen, her rental houses, and the time she made a contractor redo an entire porch railing because it leaned. Michelle told a story about Grandma taking her shopping for a graduation dress. I listened and ate half my dinner. Christian barely touched his food. He kept checking the time. After the plates were cleared, Michelle walked to the front of the room. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about Grandma's work ethic and how much the properties meant to the family. Then she rested one hand on the back of my chair. "We're not attacking Lauren," she said. "We're trying to help her before something serious happens." The room became quiet. Michelle looked toward Zachary. "Christian and I are filing for co-trusteeship based on Lauren's recent erratic behavior." Christian opened his case and removed a document. Michelle continued. "Over the past month, Lauren has experienced heart problems, severe shaking, insomnia, confusion about her medication, and growing paranoia. She's accused family members of interfering with her prescriptions. She changed the locks on her home because she believed I was entering without permission." "You were," Keith said. I touched his wrist. Michelle kept going. "She's also delayed trust business and refused reasonable family support. We believe the responsible thing is to appoint me temporarily before the 1-year review." Christian handed the document to Zachary. Mom stood. "I signed the statement because I've watched Lauren become more suspicious and difficult. Michelle has tried to help. We all have." Dad stared at his plate. Michelle looked around the room. "This isn't about money. It's about protecting Grandma's work." Christian said, "The trust is worth approximately $600,000. We can't ignore signs that its sole trustee may be medically impaired." Zachary read the first page. "Are you alleging Lauren cannot perform her duties?" "Yes," Michelle said. Are you alleging the medication issue resulted from her own confusion? Christian answered. The bottle remained in her custody. Whatever happened, it demonstrates impaired judgment and poor medication management. Zachary looked at Mom. Do you agree? Mom looked directly at me. Yes. There was no hesitation. Zachary turned to Michelle. Is this your complete basis for seeking co-trusteeship? Michelle placed both hands on the back of my chair. Yes. We're asking you to act before Lauren damages the trust. Zachary looked across the table. Lauren, were you aware they intended to do this tonight? No, Mom said. If you'd just listened when I said it was nerves, none of this needed to become so ugly. That was the moment I knew I had waited long enough. I set my napkin beside my plate and lifted the blue folder onto the table. I opened it and handed Zachary the August email first. He read Christian's question about filing a physician's finding before the annual review. Then he read the question about selling trust property after my removal. Christian leaned forward. That was a general inquiry. It was sent 3 weeks after Cheryl died, Zachary said. I was helping the family understand the document. I gave Zachary the proposed sale of the Central Avenue building. He looked at the projected distribution beside Michelle's name. This says the sale would resolve current obligations. Michelle folded her arms. That doesn't prove anything. No, I said. It proves why you wanted control. Then I handed Zachary Rodney's report. He read the first page slowly. When he reached the manufacturer records, he stopped. What is this lot identifier? The pharmacist read the lot number physically stamped on the pills inside my bottle. I placed the enlarged photograph beside the report. The lot wasn't present at Heritage when my propranolol was filled. It arrived the next morning. My bottle had already left the pharmacy. Zachary looked at Christian. The same lot was dispensed to you? Christian's face had gone pale. I have a valid prescription. I didn't say you didn't. Michelle stepped away from my chair. Lots are sent all over the state. That doesn't mean those were Christian's pills. I gave Zachary the cross-pharmacy batch record. Heritage dispensed that lot once in Kearney. The entire controlled quantity went into Christian's prescription. Nobody touched the cake. I handed over Alyssa's statement. Michelle went to the pharmacy 2 days later. She asked whether I'd picked up my refill. After Alyssa confirmed I had, Michelle used the spare key she kept after house-sitting and entered my home. That's a lie, Michelle said. I put her text on the table. Those are your words. Mom read the printed message from her seat. Michelle said, I returned Grandma's dish. Dad finally looked up. No, you didn't. Mom turned toward him. Dad's voice shook, but he kept speaking. You still had the dish when you came to our house afterward. Susan asked why you hadn't left it with Lauren. Michelle stared at him. You're confused. No, I've been quiet. That isn't the same thing. He looked at Zachary. Michelle and Christian asked us for $30,000 last winter. Susan gave them $25,000 from our savings. Michelle said she'd repay it after the trust properties were reorganized. Mom whispered, Randy. He didn't stop. I heard Christian say they needed documentation before the anniversary. I should have asked what he meant. Christian pushed his chair back. This has become completely inappropriate. Zachary turned to him. You submitted a petition alleging Lauren's symptoms proved incapacity. Those symptoms began after medication from your prescription was placed in her bottle. I didn't place anything anywhere. Michelle said, Neither did I. I gave Zachary my doctor's statement. The symptoms ended when I stopped taking the stimulant. Mom looked from the report to Michelle. You said it was probably a pharmacy error. Michelle's mouth tightened. It still could have been. No, Zachary said. The lot arrived after Lauren collected her bottle. That sentence ended the argument. Mom lowered her eyes. Zachary opened the trust binder and turned to the no contest provision. This trust bars a beneficiary from receiving an interest if that beneficiary fraudulently manufactures grounds to undermine or remove the acting trustee. Michelle shook her head. You can't decide I did something because Lauren made a folder. I'm relying on certified dispensing records, a manufacturer lot trace, dated correspondence, a witness statement, your access message, and the petition you submitted tonight." "What happens to the petition?" Mom asked. "It is rejected immediately." Michelle looked around the room as if someone might object. Nobody did. Zachary continued. "By committing to this claim after creating the alleged incapacity, Michelle has triggered the no contest clause. Her beneficiary interest is forfeited, subject to the formal notice I'll issue tomorrow. Christian has no independent beneficiary right and cannot receive through her, act as trustee, or benefit from her former share." Christian stood. "We're leaving." Zachary closed the binder. "You should preserve every phone, message, and medication record. Rodney Robles has already made a mandatory referral to the pharmacy board and local police." That was the first moment Michelle looked frightened. Not angry. Frightened. She picked up her purse and walked toward the door. Christian followed without waiting for her. Mom stayed seated. The sheet cake between us still said Cheryl Ann Carter in blue icing. After a while, Mom asked, "Did you know this would happen?" "I knew what the document said." "You let Michelle say all of that first." "Yes." "Why?" "Because if I interrupted, you would have said I misunderstood her." Mom looked down at the statement she had signed. She had no answer. The police investigation stayed quiet. There were no handcuffs at the dinner and no scene in the parking lot. Rodney transferred the sealed bottle through documented custody. Alyssa repeated her statement. My phone records confirmed Michelle's access. Christian's prescription records confirmed the source. Months later, Michelle entered a no-contest plea to medication tampering and unlawful transfer of a controlled prescription. She received probation, mandatory treatment, and an order barring her from contacting me. Christian wasn't charged with placing the pills. Investigators couldn't prove whether he handed them to Michelle or she took them herself. His employer still terminated him after learning he had used legal research from his job to plan a false trust challenge. Their debts remained theirs. The forfeited interest stayed in the trust. None of it passed to me personally. It remained with the properties, exactly as Grandma's document required. Susan apologized 3 weeks after the dinner. She came alone and sat at our kitchen table. "I should have believed you," she said. "Yes. I thought Michelle was scared and you were being stubborn. She poisoned me." Mom flinched. "I know. You called it nerves." "I know." She cried quietly. I didn't comfort her. Her apology was real. It was also late. I told her I would accept written messages, but she wasn't welcome in our house yet. She nodded. For once, she didn't ask me to make her consequence easier. Dad began calling every Sunday. Sometimes I answered, sometimes I didn't. He never complained. One evening, he came to Central Avenue while I was checking the final work. He stood in the restored front room and ran his hand over the exposed brick. "Mom knew what she was doing," he said. "Yes. I wish I'd said that while she was alive." "So do I." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the first honest conversation we'd had. The Central Avenue building passed final inspection that fall. The upstairs offices filled first. A bookkeeping business rented one storefront and a local repair shop took the other. Near the front entrance, I installed a small brass plaque. It read, "Restored in memory of Cheryl Ann Carter, who kept good records and trusted the person doing the work." On the day it went up, Keith stood beside me while I wiped a fingerprint from the corner. The building was quiet. Afternoon light crossed the new floor and reached the old metal desk we'd kept near the back wall. Grandma had been right about paper. People remember what helps them. Records remember what happened. If you stayed with me, please subscribe and tell me which city you're watching from.